Chapter 1 Introduction. On Sunday afternoon, December 14th, 2025, a quiet day in Brentwood, Los Angeles, changed in minutes. At 3:30 in the afternoon, emergency workers received a call. Someone needed help at a house on Chadbourne Avenue. The firefighters arrived quickly. What they found inside would shock the nation. 2 people were dead. The victims were Rob Reiner, age 78, a famous film director, and his wife, Michelle Singer Reiner, age 70. Both had been stabbed. By evening, this was not just a medical emergency. It was a murder investigation. The Los Angeles Police Department took control of the scene. Officers walked through the house. They looked for clues. They asked questions. Who did this? Why? How did it happen? 3 mysteries stood out from the start. First, there were no signs that anyone broke into the house. The doors and windows were not forced open. This meant something important. Whoever came inside either had a key or was invited in. Second, people close to the family said Rob and Michelle had been worried in the days before their deaths. They feared something bad might happen. But what exactly? Third, within hours of the discovery, the tragedy became part of a political fight. Before anyone knew the full facts, people began using the deaths to score points in public arguments. This was not a normal response to a family crisis. Rob and Michelle Reiner had 3 children. Their daughter Romy found the bodies and called for help. Investigators began working fast. They checked the house. They spoke to family members. They gathered evidence. The medical examiner confirmed the cause of death: stab wounds. The police noted one detail that would become critical: no forced entry. By Sunday evening, the case took a sharp turn. Officers questioned a family member. The responders had come expecting a medical problem. They left, knowing 2 people had been murdered in their own home. And that is where the story turns. Chapter 2. Who Rob was. Rob Reiner was born in 1947. His father was Carl Reiner, a comedy legend. His mother was Estelle Lebost, a singer. Rob first became famous as an actor. In the 1970s, he played Michael Stivic on the television show All in the Family. People called his character Meathead. The show was groundbreaking. It talked about race, politics, and family in new ways. Rob won 2 Emmy Awards for his work. But acting was just the beginning. In 1984, Rob directed his first major film, This is Spinal Tap. It was a fake documentary about a rock band. People loved it. Then came an amazing run of movies. Between 1984 and 1992, Rob directed film after film that became classics. Stand By Me in 1986 told a story about friendship and growing up. The Princess Bride in 1987 became a fairy tale that millions of people quoted for years. When Harry Met Sally in 1989 changed how romantic comedies were made. Misery in 1990 was a terrifying thriller. A Few Good Men in 1992 was a military courtroom drama.
These films did more than make money. They became part of American culture. Rob also worked hard on political causes. In 1998, he led a campaign in California to tax tobacco and fund programs for young children. The program still helps families today. In 2008, Rob fought for marriage equality. He worked with lawyers from both political parties. His work helped lead to the 2015 Supreme Court decision that made same-sex marriage legal across America. By the 2020s, Rob spoke out against Donald Trump, who is now president again. Rob called Trump unfit to lead. He gave money to Democratic candidates. He spoke on television about his concerns. But Rob also condemned violence, even against people he disagreed with. When conservative activist Charlie Kirk was killed in 2025, Rob said clearly that political violence was never acceptable. People who knew Rob said he cared deeply about policy details. He did not just give money or make speeches. He studied issues and worked to create real change. Yet while the world knew the movies, the family was fighting a different story. Chapter 3. Nick and the Long Fight. Nick Reiner is Rob and Michelle's son. His life has been marked by struggle. Nick first went to rehab when he was only 15 years old. Rehab is a place where people go to stop using drugs. But one visit did not fix the problem. Nick went to at least 17 different rehab programs throughout his life. He became addicted to opioids and heroin.
These are powerful drugs that change how the brain works. They are very hard to quit. Sometimes Nick refused to stay in the programs his parents arranged. Instead, he chose to live on the streets. He became homeless by choice. In a 2016 interview, Nick explained why. He said if he wanted to do things his own way and not follow his parents' suggestions, then he had to be homeless. He also said he could have easily died during those times. Rob and Michelle lived with constant fear. They worried their son would not survive. They wondered if his addiction would end in tragedy. They tried everything they could think of. They paid for treatment. They set boundaries. They offered love and support. But addiction and mental illness are diseases that money and fame cannot always cure. In 2015, Rob and Nick worked together on a film called Being Charlie. It told the story of a young man struggling with heroin addiction and his relationship with his father. Much of the story came from Nick's real life. Both father and son wrote and created the film together. Rob called it the most intimate project he had ever made. It was deeply emotional for the whole family. Making the film brought up all the painful memories again. Nick was 26 years old when the film came out. By then, he had achieved sobriety. He was no longer using drugs. The film won an award for raising awareness about substance abuse and mental health. It seemed like a turning point.
A father and son had turned their pain into art. But questions remained. Did making the film actually heal the wounds between them? Or did it just show how fragile their relationship still was? By late 2025, people close to the family began to worry again. They noticed changes in Nick's behavior. They wondered if he had relapsed. They saw signs that his mental health was declining. And then came the holiday weekend, when people around them noticed something was off. Chapter 4. The Day Before. On Saturday, December 13th, 2025, Rob and Nick went to a holiday party. The gathering was at the home of comedian Conan O'Brien. It should have been a pleasant evening with friends, but something went wrong. Witnesses at the party said Rob and Nick had a loud argument. People noticed. Nick's behavior seemed erratic. He was not acting normal. The argument was intense enough that others at the gathering could not ignore it. What exactly was said during the fight? No one has made that public. After the party ended, what happened when the family went home? These details are still unknown, but people close to the Reiners reported something important. After the argument, Rob told friends he was scared. He was scared for his son. He did not know what might happen next. Michelle had also expressed concerns about Nick's mental health in recent weeks. She could see something was wrong. The family was living through a crisis. Nick was staying at his parents' house as a guest.
The situation inside the home was tense. Did anyone think about calling for professional help that night? Did they consider getting medical or police assistance? These questions do not have clear answers yet. What is known is this: a family was in trouble. A son with a long history of addiction and mental health struggles was showing signs of serious problems. Parents who had spent decades trying to help him were frightened. The argument at the party was a warning sign. It showed that pressure was building. Saturday night passed. The family went to sleep in their Brentwood home. Sunday morning came. The hours moved slowly toward afternoon. No one outside the house knew what was happening inside. No neighbors reported hearing anything unusual. No one called for help. By mid-afternoon on Sunday, it was too late. Because what happened in the house the next day is what investigators must now reconstruct. Chapter 5: Inside the House. The Los Angeles Fire Department received a medical emergency call at 3:38 p.m. on Sunday. They sent responders immediately to the house on Chadbourne Avenue in Brentwood. The property records showed the home belonged to Rob Reiner. When the firefighters arrived, they went inside. They found two bodies: a man, age 78, a woman, about 70 years old. Both victims had stab wounds. The firefighters called for police backup. Officers from the Los Angeles Police Department arrived about 10 minutes later. What started as a medical call was now something else.
This was a homicide investigation. The police secured the scene. They put yellow tape around the property. Detectives from the LAPD Robbery Homicide Division took charge. These are the officers who handle the most serious crimes. They began their work carefully. They examined the house. They looked for evidence. They took photographs. They checked every room. One detail caught their attention immediately. There were no signs of forced entry. The doors had not been broken. The windows were intact. No one had smashed their way inside. This fact told investigators something crucial. Whoever killed Rob and Michelle either had a key to the house or the victims let them in willingly. The question from the first chapter now became sharper. If no one broke in, then who could enter? Who had access? Who would Rob and Michelle allow inside? The answer pointed towards someone they knew, someone they trusted, or someone who lived there. Romy Reiner, the couple's daughter, found her parents that afternoon. The trauma of that discovery is hard to imagine. She immediately called for help, but it was too late.
By evening, the investigation had a clear direction. Police questioned family members. They gathered statements. They looked at recent events. They asked about relationships inside the household. The timeline became clearer with each passing hour. The stab wounds meant this was a violent, personal attack. The lack of forced entry meant this was likely someone close to the family.
The sequence of events was still unclear. When exactly did the attack happen? Was it in the morning? The early afternoon? Did both victims die at the same time, or one after the other? What was the motive? Investigators could confirm certain facts: the time of the emergency call, the agencies that responded, the official cause of death. But many questions remained unanswered. What happened inside that house in the hours before the bodies were discovered? As Sunday night arrived, the LAPD made a decision. They had enough evidence to make an arrest. And by that night, police focus turns toward the person the public least expected. Chapter 6: An Arrest and a Storm. Police arrested Nick Reiner on Sunday evening around 9:15 p.m. He was taken into custody at the scene. On Monday morning at 5:04 a.m., he was officially booked on suspicion of murder. LAPD Chief Jim McDonald held a press conference Monday afternoon. He confirmed that Nick Reiner had been arrested in connection with his parents' deaths. The bail was initially set at $4 million. Then it was revoked. Nick was moved to Twin Towers Correctional Facility in downtown Los Angeles. He is being held without bail while the legal process continues. It is important to remember, these are allegations. Nick Reiner has not been convicted. The investigation is still ongoing. The legal system requires that suspects are treated as innocent until proven guilty in court. But the arrest made the tragedy real for the public.
This was not a random crime. This was not a stranger. If the allegations are true, this was a son accused of killing his own parents. The news spread fast. Television stations reported it. Newspapers wrote headlines. Social media exploded with reactions. People tried to understand how something so horrible could happen. Then, the story took an unexpected turn. Instead of focusing on the family crisis, the tragedy became part of a national political argument. On Monday, President Donald Trump posted a statement on Truth Social. Rather than offering simple condolences, Trump used the deaths to make a political point. He wrote that Rob Reiner had died due to Trump derangement syndrome, a term used to describe people who strongly oppose Trump. Trump suggested that Reiner's criticism of him had driven people crazy and led to his death. At a White House press conference later that day, Trump called Reiner a deranged person who was very bad for the country. These statements had no basis in the investigation. Police had not said anything about political motives. The evidence pointed to a family tragedy caused by addiction and mental illness, not politics. Yet within hours, the personal suffering of the Reiner family had been turned into ammunition for partisan fights. How did a case that looks like family violence become a symbol in a culture war so quickly?
Because what people said next may shape how the public remembers Rob and Michelle as much as what happened in the house. Chapter 7: The Questions After. This tragedy raises questions that go beyond one family. The first question is human and painful. What warning signs can families see when addiction and mental illness return? Rob and Michelle saw the signs. They noticed Nick's behavior changing. They heard him argue loudly at a party. Rob said he was scared. But what could they have done differently? They had already tried rehab programs, therapy, boundaries, and support. They had spent decades fighting this battle. What help actually works when a loved one is in crisis and nothing else has succeeded? The second question is about the system. Where do healthcare, rehab centers, police, and crisis response fail or succeed? The Reiners had money. They had access to the best treatment available, yet their resources could not prevent disaster. If a wealthy, connected family cannot get adequate help, what happens to families with less money and fewer options? Are there gaps in how America handles mental health emergencies? Could better crisis intervention have saved lives? The third question is about public discourse. What does it mean when leaders use tragedy for political attacks without waiting for facts? President Trump blamed Rob Reiner's political views for his own death before investigators even finished their work. This was not analysis. This was weaponization.
How does this kind of rhetoric change how we grieve as a society? Does it make grief into ammunition? The open loops from earlier chapters now come into focus. The forced entry question. No break-in means the killer had access. This points to someone inside the family, someone who lived there or was invited in. But it does not prove guilt by itself. The argument at the party. This was clearly a sign of escalation. Tensions were high. Nick was behaving strangely. This shows the crisis building, but it does not explain exactly what happened the next day. The contrast between public image and private fear. Rob was a confident public figure who fought for causes he believed in, but privately he was a frightened father who did not know how to save his son. This gap between external success and internal struggle is something many families understand. Yet each answer leads to more questions. The investigation continues. The legal process will take months or years. The full truth may never be completely known. And in the last chapter, we decide what can be said with care, what must be left uncertain, and what lessons still demand action. Chapter 8. What we learn. It is time to separate what we know from what we do not know. 3 layers help us understand this tragedy clearly. First, what has been reported and confirmed by officials. Rob and Michelle Reiner were found dead in their Brentwood home on December 14, 2025. Both died from stab wounds.
Police arrested their son, Nick Reiner, and charged him with murder. There were no signs of forced entry to the house. These facts come from official sources and are not in dispute. Second, what is alleged and still under legal review. Nick Reiner is accused of killing his parents, but he has not been convicted. The legal process requires that he be treated as innocent until proven guilty in court. The motive is not fully known. The exact sequence of events inside the house has not been made public. These details will emerge during the trial, if there is one. Third, what is social meaning? This is about how the public reacted, argued, and understood the tragedy. President Trump politicized the deaths immediately, blaming Rob Reiner's opposition to him for causing the violence. Some Republicans criticized Trump's response. Most Americans saw this as a family tragedy, not a political event. The argument about whether harsh political rhetoric contributes to real-world violence continued, as it has for years. Now we can resolve the open loops as much as an honest account allows. Why was there no forced entry? Because the killer either lived there or was welcomed inside. This points toward Nick, who was staying at the house. But this detail alone does not prove guilt. It just limits the possibilities. What about the argument the day before? It shows that tensions were high and Nick was not well. It suggests escalation. But many families have arguments without violence following.
The argument was a warning sign, not a direct cause. What about the contrast between Rob's public confidence and private fear? This shows something important about mental illness and addiction. They do not respect wealth or fame. Success in one area of life does not protect families from crisis in another. Rob could help change national policy, but could not save his own son. This is not a moral judgment, it is a reality. So what can we learn? First, families need earlier, stronger crisis pathways. When someone is showing signs of mental health breakdown or relapse, there should be clear, fast ways to get help before tragedy strikes. The system as it exists now often fails. Second, public figures should not use tragedy as a weapon. Grief should be respected. Rushing to political conclusions before facts are known is harmful and wrong. Third, audiences should hold space for uncertainty while demanding humane solutions. We do not need to know every detail to care about preventing similar tragedies. We can push for better mental health resources, stronger crisis intervention, and more compassionate public discourse even while the legal process continues. This story is both a single shocking crime and a warning sign. It is a warning about how we handle addiction, which affects millions of families across all economic levels. It is a warning about how we talk about mental illness, which still carries stigma and shame.
It is a warning about how we use other people's pain in public arguments, turning suffering into content. The Reiner family has lost 2 people. Their remaining children must live with this tragedy forever. Whatever happens in court, that loss cannot be undone. The question is whether the rest of us will learn anything from it. Will we build better systems to help families in crisis? Will we speak about tragedy with more care and less exploitation? Will we remember that behind every headline is human grief that deserves respect? What do you think could have prevented this tragedy? Share your thoughts in the comments.
Hey there! Just a second before you go. If you learned something new today, please give this video a like, write your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. It only takes a second, and it really, really helps to create even better English videos for you. Your support means the world. Thank you.